Book two.
You're connected.
I got the book. Real book.
Wonderful. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a preview book launch. Steve's book, The List, comes out next Tuesday. But I'm happy to say that he has signed hundreds of copies for us, and we have shipped out to those people on our mail order list. We shipped them out today, so you should be getting your book right on time. So thank you, Steve, for signing the list. So, before we talk about it, we've never really had a big discussion about your life before you became a writer because it wasn't particularly pertinent. But for this book, maybe you ought to tell people about your pre-writing life as an attorney.
Yeah, I was a lawyer for 30 years in a small South Georgia town on the coast called St. Mary's, Georgia. It's as far south and east as you can go in the corner down above Jacksonville, Florida. And
Mm.
we had a paper mill. And that paper mill had been there since the 1940s. And St. Mary's, when I got there in 1979, was basically a company town. That's what it was. Now, the Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base came in the 80s and changed all that. But for the 1970s and 80s, while I was there, it was a company town, and I got to experience what a company town is like. And I practiced law. I had my own little practice, just like Brent Walker does in the story. And I represented labor union there, the electrical workers. I was involved in a lot of arbitrations and contract negotiations and all kinds of things. And then one day the company came and said, "We'd like to hire you to represent us." So I switched sides, just like Brent Walker does, just like he does. And I was sitting in an arbitration one day, and it occurred to me, what would happen if the company didn't mess with arbitration? Just said, we're not going to mess with that anymore. We're not going to deal with the uncertainty of it. And Gilman Paper Company was self-insured. So what if they controlled their insurance costs by eliminating claims? What if they took out competition? What if they, in the retirement program, retirees who were going to be too much of a payout, what if they eliminated these in a systematic way? And so was born The List. It's a story of a lawyer in a small town who deals with a company that has a very, very unique way of controlling its cost. It does it through murder. Very, very well done murders.
Summed up. So inevitably, one thinks about John Grisham and the firm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've always thought that was interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me the firm came out either the year or right around the time that law firms first were allowed to advertise, because up until there was some, I don't remember what it was exactly, law firms did not like take out billboards and
No,
newspaper
it
ads.
was a ban. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled in the early 1990s that lawyer advertising was covered under commercial speech, which means it was First Amendment protected.
Right.
So,
And so therefore, I often find that books that have a phenomenal success beyond what you might just expect happen to hit a moment in the zeitgeist or a moment when there's something in society that's a bit tectonic. And I thought when that happened, when John's book published and the law firm ban against advertising was done away with, that maybe people were a little more willing to consider a crooked law firm.
yeah, let's see. In my case, I wrote this novel in 1992.
Right.
This was the second manuscript I ever wrote in my life. This was it. So the firm's influence is very strong in this book. There's no question about that. Now I go in a different way than John did in the firm, but I was taken by the firm. I remember reading the firm. I bought it in an airport, and read it on the flight there and back, and it was just amazing. I loved it. It was just phenomenal, and it was riding high. Now this book went in a drawer. It never went to New York publishers. It stayed in a drawer till 2020. And so it stayed in the drawer for 18 years, no, I'm sorry, 28 years.
Yeah, 20, I was
28,
gonna,
28 years,
yep,
28
bad
years in the
math there.
drawer.
Whoops.
And during COVID, I got it out. And I started looking at it and I said, I really like this story. Now, it's told terrible because I wrote it. It was the second thing I ever wrote in my life. So it's not going to be, ready for prime time at all. But I said, this is a good story. So I rewrote it during COVID. I rewrote it and I applied all of the things I'd learned in 28 years. And I took a 118,000 word manuscript and made it 102,000 words. So I made it much tighter.
Mhm.
And I gave it. I went to Grand Central, and they bought it. They said, "Let's put it out there." So I'm thrilled that it's out here because it's there's a lot of it's semi-autobiographical. There's a lot of me in this book. The book is dedicated to a very good friend of mine who taught me a lot about politics and law, and he's still alive. In fact, I'm going to go see him next Monday and bring him a copy of the book. He doesn't know that it's there. Hank Reed, the character in the book, is really based on him, very much based on him. And so there's a lot of this one's a little special to me, very very special to me.
So this town, Concord, Georgia, your company town, is modeled upon St. Mary's, right?
Yes, it is modeled a lot. Now I took it to the next level. It occurred to me what would happen if you took the company town up a level, one more level. In a company town, the company had influence everywhere. They had company employees on city councils, tax assessors' offices. They had influence everywhere. Now they could only control to a certain degree, but I went a little further where they had real control and much more control and how they used things using the information age. It's interesting. Remember when I wrote this book, there were no cell phones, there were no personal computers, there were no internet. So when I rewrote it, I had to incorporate that new technology into the story, and it did change things a lot.
Yes, now I can see what it would. I keep hearing in my head that old song, I sold my soul or I owe my soul to the company store. Who was that? I wanted to say Johnny Cash, but I don't think it was him.
That's pretty much what it was. And then the epigraph of the novel, I have it right here. The epigraph of the novel is Mark 8:36. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? And that's really what the book's about that right there, about selling your soul and is it worth it? And how that unravels and comes together. So a company town was a very unique. I got to see the end and the unraveling of St. Mary's as a company town. I saw how it worked.
Well, there's certainly, there were oil company towns. I'm trying to remember, there was a town in Texas that was particularly
A lot
notorious.
of those. Henry Ford created a company town for all his people. Nestle had a company town. Paper mills were notorious for it because they were built in the South, in poor regions of the South where there was a lot of timber and fresh water, which is what they needed to make
Right.
paper. So they would go in and basically kind of take over the area. They just take over everything. But I wondered what would happen if you really took it to the extreme. You went a little bit further and really made it where you could literally profit from that control.
Right. No, you did, and you're pretty ruthless about it. I was thinking about Hershey. Isn't Hershey, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that would have been a company town, absolutely.
May still even be a company
To
town.
some degree, the diversification, the internet, everything's changed that. I know when the Navy came to St. Mary's, it changed everything. It changed it.
It does, but I think there are some campi, using the plural, in tech country, in Silicon Valley and all, that are more or less like company towns.
I know,
Um,
I know when the paper company in St. Mary's like had a company employee who was chairman of the board of assessors for years and years and years. So they had someone right where they needed him in case, their property got overassessed. And they had people on city council. The city council, all of them worked at the mill, all of them.
Right.
You
And two
know,
other examples I could give you: Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the Oak Ridge National
yeah, that
Laboratory,
would be
and
another
Los
company.
Alamos, New Mexico, where it was the big government agency was basically the company town and the major employer. So in your town, that was government funded, but in a regular business company town, the economy of the town is tied
Very
totally
dependent on it. And we
to
were
the
very lucky
company.
in St. Mary's
Yeah,
because that paper company's ownership was very benevolent. The employees at it was Gilman Paper Company. Gilman Paper Company had a great deal. I mean, they had great benefits. They had great salary. Mr. Gilman was extremely generous. They had a very benevolent person in that position. So it worked out really well for them. And then when he died, the mill was sold to another company. It lasted 3 more years and then it closed. And
Really?
then, yeah, it only lasted 3 years after Mr. Gilman died. And when it closed, 900 people were out of work.
Why did it close?
The company that took it over just didn't make it work, couldn't make it work, and shut it down.
Interesting.
They just shut it down. And I remember the day I was chairman of the county commission, and the paper company was the number one taxpayer in Camden County. They paid one full mill of tax. Of our, at that time, 12 mills, they paid one of those. Just that company did by itself. And I remember they shut down in September and they said we're not paying our taxes this year. We don't have the money. And we had to make adjustments immediately to compensate for the loss of that much money in the budget.
Do you
And it
think
was
that the company was on its way out when he died, or was it
no,
a
no,
change
no,
of
no. It was
ownership?
sold to a foreign organization bought it,
Oh,
and
okay.
they basically stripped it for parts and then shut it down, is what they did.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
they
So
stripped
that's
it for
sort of
parts and shut it down.
predatory acquisition thing that
Yeah,
came.
and shut it down. No, no, it was running fine until Mr. Gilman died. He ran it. He, like I said, he was an extremely generous, well-liked individual.
Hmm. Do you know when the Trump tariffs were announced, our local ABC, I think it was ABC or maybe it was PBS, wanted to interview me about whether how I thought the tariffs would affect the book business. And I said that while I am actually in favor of onshoring some industries, there wasn't any way to grow trees fast enough to make up for the loss of the Canadian pulpwood. So the paper industry was not going to benefit
No.
from the tariffs. It was, in fact, going to be pretty destructive.
Well, in St. Mary's, they long ago stopped harvesting locally because it was,
Yeah.
they stopped. So Camden County was 75% pine trees, and they're still there. They're still there to this day. I mean, yeah, they long ago in the, towards even into the 90s and the early 2000s, they stopped harvesting locally. It was just cheaper to get it elsewhere.
That's interesting. If there is a place, see, I was thinking about Maine, and whatever is pulp, because there were some great paper mills in that area. But I suppose then I'm wrong in the sense that maybe the southern paper mills could come back if there were,
Well,
enough
okay,
incentive for it.
all the mills closed. They're still there. There's one in Fernandina still, and there's one in Brunswick still. But the one in St. Mary's is gone, and there's several others up the coast are all gone. They're all gone. The mill itself in St. Mary's was razed to the ground, so it's basically just vacant land now, is what it is.
So what has St. Mary's done to compensate for it? I
Well, you
mean,
had the Navy. The
well,
Navy
I
came.
know, but is that enough? Because that's a different version of a company
Well,
town.
I agree, but they don't, the Navy does not, the Navy never really interjected itself in our local politics. I have to say that. They kind of stayed out of everything. Even when Navy personnel wanted to run for office, they discouraged it. They were not happy about it. They did not, they were very stick to themselves. I will say that. I never saw that influence from the Navy there at all. They were much more, now today they're much more integrated and a lot of retired Navy personnel live in St. Mary's. So, it's a much more. So they diversified into the Navy. Did Camden County diversify enough? No, it did not. It needs more. It needs more.
Hmm. Well, let's talk about Brent Walker and his backstory because actually, when this book opens, he hasn't lived in Concord, Georgia, aka St. Mary's, for quite some time.
Yeah, he moved away 10 years earlier after the death of his wife and moved to Atlanta. He has a lot of guilt about that, and he's got to deal with that. He's coming back home because his mother's sick, and he needs to come home to take care of her. And he takes a job with the paper company, and he becomes assistant general counsel for the paper company. And he gets in there. What he doesn't know is that the company's owned by three people, which he does know, but one of the three owners has a change of heart. He's dying, his conscience is getting to him, and he wants to set things right, and he's going to do it through Brent. So Brent finds himself dead in the crosshairs
Aha.
of everything.
Which is why this is a thriller, right?
Yeah,
As
yeah.
opposed to,
He
right.
doesn't realize it till too late that he's being used and he's thrown into this, and they all want to kill him.
So where was his father in all this? His father is dead if Brent is coming home to take
His
care of his.
father died 2 years earlier. Yes, his
What
father's
did his
gone.
father do? Did he
His
work for
father
the?
worked at the mill.
Okay.
He worked at the paper mill. And so his father died 2 years earlier. Now that death will figure into the story. It will figure into the story. I don't want to say much because that'll give away something, but
Yeah, no.
it will figure into the story, yes.
So Brent, an attorney, comes back from Atlanta. He's single because his wife is dead.
Hmm?
He's taking care of his mom. So he's actually in a sort of pivotal position of reimagining his life.
He is. He had a law practice before in Concord, and he represented the union. He represented workers at the mill. He did everything I did. He goes away, he comes back, and now he works for the company. And that's where he gets caught up because his allegiance is torn to the people he helped before and to his new employer. He gets torn between that. And then he gets even more torn when one of the owners, Christopher Bozin, decides to use him to set his conscience straight. And then that's when he gets in the crosshairs.
So,
And
I mean, there's a major ethical issue in this book, which,
very
he
much
only
so.
becomes gradually aware of. You start this book off with a really, you know, well executed and ruthless killing.
Yeah, I
Um,
wanted you to know how these guys work. The way they kill people is very methodic. It's called the priority program. They have rules. They have all kinds of things in place. They're very careful. They just don't kill people. The deaths are orchestrated where they make sense and where they fit with what the known afflictions of the person is. They're very clever in what they do. And I wanted to start it off and let you see that right off the bat. And then when you get into chapter one and you move on for the next 30 pages, there's more of that where you see methodical things that are going on. I knew early on I couldn't make a secret of the fact of what the company was doing. You're going
right,
to know that early on. The book is about the unraveling of that, how
sure.
that unravels and comes apart.
Well, you started with an execution. I mean, which is
Yeah.
essentially what it is. And, the reader is left wondering, why is this old fellow out fishing? Why is he targeted by whoever these killers are? And then, as you say, you gradually illustrate that. This works because the company has access to employees' medical
Yeah,
records,
this is where
right?
I modernized the story a lot because they own the hospital, they own the convalescent center, they own a lot of the businesses in town. The three owners do. So they have data. They have all this data on employees, tons and tons of data, and they just assimilate that data. So they're able to learn a lot about you very quickly because they're buying the local, all the workers are buying their drugs at the local CVS. They're coming to the hospital to get treated. They're going to the convalescent center. They're going to all these places, and this data assimilates where they can make decisions on who they want to kill, who they don't want to kill. And this was where I modernized it a little bit from the original story.
Yeah, well, it's taking risk assessment up to
Very
to a
much
much
so. They're
higher
they're doing
level.
risk assessment. That's exactly
Yeah.
what they're doing. Yeah,
And the frightening part is um, that those tools are available to,
absolutely.
you know, um, I had an interesting experience with our major health provider the other day. I won't go into how I learned, but anyway, when I showed up for the first time in like 25 years, they wanted to know the date I retired. And, I was sure it was a Medicaid question or a
Yeah.
Medicare question rather. And I couldn't remember because, the bookstores, I've never had a salary, it's a not-for-profit bookstore. So when did I actually retire?
You never did really, did you?
Well, but the point of the question, when you think about it, Steve, the point of the question is Medicare going to be wanting an employer contribution? And, otherwise, why would they care? Now, I did discover afterward when straightening it out, because I took a blind guess that was like 20 years wrong, because I wasn't sure what was going on, was that somebody had actually accidentally erased a lot of data. And the real question was, they needed to be sure they were identifying their patients correctly.
Well, they
So,
asked me that question too. I get asked that question.
did you?
Oh yeah, I get asked that question. Yeah.
Well, okay. I do think that it is an effort by Medicare to look for employee contributions. They always ask you if you're hurt on the job, or do you have employee insurance and so forth. So, but I really had trouble figuring it out because I'm not retired.
I'm not either.
I'm also not salaried.
I'm not
And
either.
yeah,
I'm
right.
not either.
So what was the answer to the question? Was
That's what I said. I said the same thing. I'm not retired and I don't work for anybody. I work myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought it was kind
And
of
they get
interesting.
15% of our salary from self-employment tax, for God's sakes.
Well, but I mean, if you take that further in the direction you're writing in this book, there's practically nothing that your medical provider doesn't
Correct. Right.
actually know
And,
about
and in
you.
this case, the three owners of the paper mill own all that data. They
Right.
have all that data, and they're self-insured too. By the way, the company's self-insured,
Ah,
so they have all your medical records. They have everything at their disposal, and with that kind of data, you can make a lot of decisions on people. You can really look at things.
wow, it's kind of a version here of 1984.
Yeah, that's what occurred to me though years ago when I was there representing the company. I said, "Wow, they do know a lot about people here." Now I took it further. I went even further because in my case, the Mr. Gilman didn't own any. He didn't own every business in town. He didn't have
Right,
any of that there. I took it further. I took it
right.
beyond that where you could do it, and it just occurred to me if you had all this information, just what could you do with all that?
Right. Well, I think in some of the coal mining towns back in West Virginia and whatever, that they actually had, there was the company store. I mean,
Yeah,
I
oh
think
yeah,
it
and
was,
it came out of your paycheck.
yeah,
Now in St. Mary's we did, and we had chain stores, we had Walmart, we had all those kind of things. In that sense, we were not a company town, but in the sense of government, we were because the company did have its tentacles into the government. Absolutely. Had it in there. So that they could keep an eye and make sure nothing went crazy. Now I will say for our company, they paid a full mill of tax. They paid a pretty substantial amount of taxes in our county. But I wondered what would happen. You could take it to an extreme, and that's what the list is. It's going to the extreme.
So you've written your Cotton Malone. This is your 27th novel plus four with MJ Rose. That were those actual books or were those novellas?
Novellas. There were novellas.
That's what I thought. So, in your Cotton Malone series, you have 24, I think it is.
20, 20, 20.
Really?
Yeah, 20 cottons, and then there's seven standalones. This will be this is the seventh standalone. So 27. The next cotton comes in February next year, 28.
Ah, I see what happened because I'm looking at the listing,
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they
but
put the standalones in there.
they did.
They
That's what
did.
threw
Yeah,
me. I was
yeah. They
thinking
put the
they were
standalones in there. Yeah.
right. Okay. So let's look ahead. Let's talk about February for a moment because I'm sure that lots of people watching this want to know what's going to go happen with cotton, and it's always
Cotton's coming back.
interesting.
He is. He's going to have a really cool story. It's going to deal with the largest book in the world. It's called The Devil's Bible. It's in Stockholm in the National Library there. It was plundered by the Swedes in 1648 from the Bohemians, which are the Czechs, modern day Czech Republic. And they've kept it ever since. And Cotton gets caught up in an adventure with the Devil's Bible.
It sounds wonderful. Do you know, I can remember on our first cruise of the Baltic, I realized that Sweden in that time was like the major power.
Superpower. Yeah,
Huge. Yeah.
huge, huge superpower. In the middle to the later part of the 18th century is when they shifted and moved away from that into a more of a agrarian within themselves society. But in the 17th, 16th, 17th century, they were
Yeah.
world power. Absolutely.
Sorry.
Oh, bless you.
Sorry, I was going to sneeze. No, I know there's a wonderful museum, the name of which will come to me in Stockholm, where they, brought up a ship that
Oh,
they
the
had,
Vasa Museum.
the
Yeah.
Vasa, that's
Yeah.
it.
There's a whole scene in the novel that takes place there.
I loved it. It was one of
Yeah.
my favorite
Oh,
museums.
it's incredible to walk in there and see that giant ship. It's a surreal thing, but I often wondered what would happen if we could get on it and do some things. And so Cotton gets involved in all of that there. It's a good story, and this book is interesting because over the next 3 to 4 Cotton Malone books, Cotton's world's going to get upended a little bit.
Ah,
Yeah, there's going to be some changes in Cotton's world. I'm gonna modify this. Things are changing. At the end of Atlas Maneuver, there was a discussion of whether he might have a daughter. And so we're going to deal with that. We're going to
uh-huh.
deal with some other things. So Cotton's world is about to get upended a little bit. So I'm going to change things up. So it's going to be interesting for what he has to deal with over the next 3 to 4 books.
You really do love ranging around the world, finding interesting locations.
Yeah, good.
I think Sweden is a fascinating country. Are you in the book taking him as far as Lapland?
No, we're staying in Stockholm and up to Uppsala. That's as far north as we go. We stay right in that area.
Yeah,
So
Uppsala is a fascinating community. The
beautiful
one
place.
time
I did loved
The
it.
one
And I'm
time
going.
Rob
Yeah,
and I were there, I forgot. Well, we were there, we couldn't change it, but everybody goes on vacation in August,
yeah.
and they
The
all
whole
head
country
for
shuts down.
Spain. Right. So we did that whole walk in Uppsala down, the old way past the barrows down to the museum because Uppsala, for those of you who don't know, is like the Oxford of Sweden. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful university.
University Town. I went up there. Yeah.
Yep. And as it happened, because it was August and everything was on vacation, the only restaurant open in Uppsala, Sweden was a Greek restaurant. So, I always like, to try to match what we're eating to the place that we are.
Yeah.
So, a Greek restaurant wasn't really on my radar.
Do what you gotta do.
But the food was great, and they introduced us to this wonderful thing with yogurt and honey that the Greeks like as a dessert. I mean, we had a wonderful time, but I sort of wish I could have gone back. That's also the place where the guy that developed all the mapped out the genus for plants, and he has his own garden there. I'll think of it. He's the biologist that came up with all the plant
I also have the
classification.
Silver Bible there too, which was plundered by the Swedes. And
Is the Bible in Uppsala, not
it's
Stockholm?
in the Silver Bible. The Devil's
Okay.
Bible is in Stockholm.
Ah,
But they
gotcha.
stole them both. They stole them both from the Czechs. And you were talking about locations and all. When I was in New Zealand, I got an idea for a novel. So Cotton's going to be headed to New Zealand. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, he's
Hell,
going to
that's
New
really
Zealand.
wonderful.
I've been wanting to send him down there, and I finally got an idea for a book while I was there. So that'll probably be in 2030.
Okay.
2/3, yeah.
Well, I will keep taking photographs, so we could always do one with the slideshow. But
Yeah.
I like that. So many thrillers remain Eurocentric, and you've gone to China. I
Yep.
mean, you have taken him further afield
I've
than
taken him to Morocco and to Africa. I wanted to get him to the South Pacific, and I finally got a story while we were there. So I'm going to do Romania next, where he's going to go to Romania for the 2028 novel. And then in 2030, probably New Zealand is where he's headed.
So have you visited Romania? Have you done that?
Yes, I went there last year.
Okay. Did you do like a river cruise from the Black Sea
No, I
to
went to
Budapest?
Transylvania to Brasov, and I stayed in the central part of Transylvania from Cebu to Brasov for 2 weeks, and we were
Okay.
there, and it was just beautiful. I loved Romania, and so Cotton's going to headed there for an interesting thing from something from World War One that's real that he's going to get caught up in.
So are you going to try to deal with Ceausescu and the
We'll,
whole
we'll, we'll
communist?
mention him and deal with him, but it's mainly dealing with the old Romanian monarchy. They had a king until World War II,
Right.
and so we're going to deal with that and something from World War One that's real that happened that he gets caught up in, and he's also going to be on the hunt for his daughter. He's going to look for his daughter.
Wow, that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
I loved Romania. We went actually up into the Carpathians to visit what is falsely claimed to be Dracula's castle, but
We
it
went, we did.
isn't.
It
Um,
isn't, no, but we actually did something really cool. We had dinner in the castle at night.
did you?
Yeah, you can rent it. And we rented it, and there was 8 of us, and we're the only ones in the castle. And they bring these actors in to portray Vlad and all the other characters, and
Right?
they're the character the whole time while you're eating. And it was, and we had the whole castle to ourselves right there.
That is so
It was
cool.
really cool. It was really neat. We did that. We stayed in Brazov, which is about 30 minutes away.
Right.
And we spent, as I said, we used Brazov as a base, and we went out every day. And then we went to Cebu and went out from there. And Pennsylvania is big. You can't see it all in one trip. It's very big. But we
It
were
is
up in,
big.
yeah, we were in the
I was we had a hard time, and the reason I asked you about Ceausescu when the communists were trying to sort of rev up, or at least pretend that there was some sort of industrial thing going on. They built these factories in some of those beautiful valleys, and the factories never actually did anything.
no,
They
there's
didn't make
ruins now.
anything.
I
And
saw
now the
some.
problem is how to get rid of them because, getting rid of something like that, there's a lot of toxicity involved. And it's too bad because those valleys are so gorgeous.
It's a beautiful country, and we saw a couple of those old industrial sites.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. And but it's a wonderful country. They have something really special there. If they could get into the tourism business, they could do really well.
Well, we actually were there as tourists,
Yeah.
taking the a cruise from Bucharest. Then you go down to the Black Sea, but then river ships are not seaworthy, so you can't go into the Black Sea. So you turn around, and there's the mouth of the Danube is a magnificent marsh, and you can do little boats and go out and do fish the whole nine. It's beautiful, and then they turn around and go back through the Iron Gate and so forth, and usually end up in Budapest. And that I think did until the war, the Crimea, the Ukraine war with Russia was a pretty booming tourist thing. But now I think,
Yeah,
it's a little
we
risky,
were there with a car and driver, so we went out every day, and
right?
we had a guy who was from there, so he was great, and we got to really see a lot of Transylvania. We did. It was really cool. The novel's gonna be fun. I'm gonna have a good time writing it. I'm
Oh,
gonna
I'm
start
looking.
writing it in about 6 weeks from now. I'll start writing it.
Well, I'm really looking forward to all of this. It sounds wonderful. I love it when people write books about places that I have been. Um, Right. So, Jen, come back and see if we have questions from the audience that you are watching. So, everybody, this is Jen. Patrick's on vacation, and Jen is a new staff member, and she's going to be doing some of the videos from time to time, which will be great.
Okay.
Yes, we had a question. Will the next Cotton book have any update on the family thing that you introduced in the Atlas book?
Yes.
And when is the Luke Daniels book getting released? They put all
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
together.
As I said, Cotton's going to go search for his daughter in the Romania book, which will come out in 28. And 27 will be the Luke Daniels book. The third book in the Luke Daniels series will come in the spring of 27. It's a fun book. It's going to deal with Walt Disney. And
Ah,
Wow.
it's called The Sorcerer's Veil. And it deals with Disney's 1941 trip to South America that he took down there, and something that happened during that trip. And Luke gets caught up in a modern day adventure that it deals with that.
Oh, that
It'll be
sounds
fun.
wonderful.
I've
Yeah.
been wanting to put Walt Disney and Disney into a novel where you're just not a backdrop or just a little piece. You are the plot. It's the plot. And so that'll come out in 27.
Okay, great. And then another question that we have from Stefania from Italy.
Oh, Father Giamenta. Yeah, that's Father Giamenta. All right.
She would like to
No,
know
it's a he.
because technology has had, if any technology changes over the years have had a big impact on your work and your way of writing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's Father Stefano is Stephen
no, no,
actually.
no, no, no. This is actually Stefania.
Stefania.
No, it's a woman called Stefania. She's one of our most loyal viewers. She lives
Oh
in,
wow, because there's Stefano
yeah,
Giamenta who's a character in the novel.
Oh,
Ah,
And
okay.
he's
Now,
actually in Italy right now. That's
yes,
where he is. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right.
very
My
cool.
apologies. I got it wrong.
wow.
No, how would you know? We feel that she stays up way too late because she watches this.
Yeah, because wow, it's 2 o'clock in the morning there,
I
right?
know. She said, I know.
So yes, technology has changed. As I mentioned with the list, there was no internet, no phone, no cell phones when I wrote the novel. So when I rewrote it, I had to incorporate all of that technology in, which actually changed some of the scenes because it became a little more, it's very convenient what we have today that I didn't have when I wrote the book. In the Cotton Malone books, though, they're all set right now. So I try to incorporate the most latest stuff I can to put in there. Absolutely.
Great. And then a question about the Disney book. Did Disney have to approve the story or because he's like a
Huh.
public figure?
No, he's a public figure. He's a
Yeah.
public figure. And the trip he took in 41 is public. There's an entire set of scenes, though, that take place inside Disney World. And
Ooh,
so there's a lot in Disney World. Yeah, I got to use Disney World in a thriller, and not in a bad way. It's a good way, but it made for a great locale for Luke to deal with what he had to deal with.
Okay, great. That's all the questions that we had.
okay, wonderful. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Let me remind everybody that we have autographed copies of the list. It formally goes on sale Tuesday if you want to come into the bookstore and pick it up. But if you want to order one to be shipped to you, we can actually send those out by the time it gets to
Absolutely.
you. It will be there. Right. I do think if you are a John Grisham or even a David Baldacci reader, that legal thrillers are, I wonder, it's a wonderful genre among thrillers, I think.
Hmm.
And you can learn a lot when you read them. So I think if you are a fan of those authors, you would definitely enjoy the list. So
Thank you. Thank you.
congratulations on getting it in print some 28 years,
30, no, 33 years.
33 years.
33 years. Yeah.
But you really illustrate something great there, Steve, which is that for an author, never throw anything away.
No, don't throw it away.
You know, you put it in the drawer, and eventually, it
I
became.
pulled it out during COVID and said, this is a good story. It just needs to be rewritten. So I rewrote it.
And I'm sure you're right too, that when you were such a novice writer, that you may not have had the skills to tell this story.
That was the point. It was laborious. So, as I said, I got rid of about 17,000 words, something like that, 16, 17. That's a lot, so I got rid of it. So
Yeah.
that's what,
Did you restructure it? Did the
just a
original
little bit, a little restructuring. It's about 90% the original story. I had to restructure it a little bit, but I rewrote it. So it is significantly, smoother, cleaner, much better than the original, much better.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. It was wonderful to talk to you. We'll
Thank
sort
you,
out
Barbara.
something for February.
We'll
Bye,
see you in
everybody.
February.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
All right.
Bye.
All right, Jen, you have to turn us off.
Okay, I am ending everything right now.
There you go. All right.